But there's something so vexing about you. It's like the gods above a stone to prove. We've been through this before, fell in and out. I said no more, but still I want you like a mad, mad woman.
I'm freezing outside, I feel my skin tight, my coat is inside, but I look up at you.
Nobody. There is a highly calculated, deeply artificial, and completely sterile corporate formula that has entirely governed the intersection of professional sports and mainstream pop culture for the past 4 decades. And it is currently being violently, unapologetically dismantled right in front of our very eyes. The traditional archaic public relations establishment desperately wants you to believe that in order for an elite athlete to cross over into mainstream global superstar stardom, they absolutely must submit to a deeply manufactured corporate pipeline. They want you to believe it requires massive million-dollar marketing campaigns, highly scripted television commercials, forced celebrity networking events, and completely soulless focus-grouped brand activations. But every once in a generation, an athletic anomaly violently crashes through that artificial, suffocating matrix, completely detonates the outdated corporate rulebook, and proves that raw, unadulterated, unapologetic authenticity is the single most terrifying, unstoppable currency on planet Earth. Welcome back to Plus Off Prio Skate, the absolute, undisputed premier destination on the entire internet for the raw, analytical, and completely unfiltered truth behind the ruthless biomechanics, the agonizing locker room psychology, and the elite geopolitical business of professional figure skating. Today, we are actively, ruthlessly tearing down the illusion of the manufactured celebrity athlete. Because what exactly transpired on the internet this week involving the reigning 2026 Olympic gold medalist Alysa Liu was absolutely not a calculated PR stunt. And we are talking about the completely awe-inspiring, internet-shattering, highly viral visual of Alysa Liu completely stepping out of her athletic element, walking into the frame wearing a brilliant vintage-inspired orange mini dress, immaculate knee-high boots, and a perfectly matching retro headband, actively standing shoulder to shoulder with one of the most critically acclaimed, globally dominant musical artists of the entire decade, Laufey. This was not a red carpet photo opportunity. This was not a paid, heavily sponsored corporate advertisement. This was a completely organic, highly synchronized, effortlessly cool dance video that actively caused the absolute biggest names in the global music industry to completely lose their collective minds in the comment section. The traditional sports media is currently scrambling, utterly confused as to how a 20-year-old figure skater from California quietly, aggressively became the absolute most culturally connected, globally relevant athlete on the entire planet without ever explicitly trying to be famous. We are going to aggressively break down the terrifyingly brilliant, entirely organic Olympic musical choices she made, the massive, tear-inducing emotional reactions from international pop stars, and exactly why her completely fluid, deeply rebellious off-ice aesthetic proves that she is operating on a psychological frequency that the old guard simply cannot mathematically comprehend. Buckle up, hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and let us ruthlessly dissect the absolute anatomy of a Gen Z cultural revolution. To truly, deeply comprehend the sheer, staggering magnitude of the cultural shockwave that Alysa Liu just unleashed upon the internet, you have to meticulously analyze the absolute rarity of the interactions taking place in her comment sections. We see forced, heavily manufactured athletic and musical collaborations every single day. We see massive record labels aggressively paying athletes to use specific songs in their TikTok videos. It is a completely saturated, highly cynical digital environment where the casual fan base can instantly, intuitively smell artificial corporate interference from a mile away. But when Laufey posted that video captioned simply, "Welcome to the party," featuring herself in pristine white and Alyssa in vibrant orange, entirely matching each other's elite energy, the digital atmosphere fundamentally shifted. The official United States figure skating account immediately jumped in. But the absolute, undeniable ultimate validation, the specific comment that completely broke the global algorithm and sent the pop culture ecosystem into an absolute frenzy, came directly from Pink Pantheress. It was a completely raw, unfiltered, enthusiastic reaction from a highly elusive artist who currently commands millions of dedicated global listeners and dictates the absolute cutting edge of modern pop culture. That specific interaction actively communicates significantly more than any heavily drafted, sterile corporate press release ever could in 1,000 years. It mathematically proved that the absolute biggest, most culturally relevant musical artists on the planet are not just casually aware of Alysa Liu. They are actively watching her. They are genuinely paying very close attention to her artistic choices, and they are deeply, enthusiastically excited by her sheer existence. That level of organic, highly coveted cultural gravity absolutely does not happen by accident. But it also absolutely does not happen through the archaic methods that traditional sports agencies still blindly rely on. Alysa Liu has completely bypassed the traditional gatekeepers of fame and actively established her own, undeniably powerful cultural empire strictly through her own authentic, unapologetic actions. To fully understand the elite architectural foundation of this massive cultural crossover, we have to immediately rewind the tape and look directly at the absolute psychological and artistic masterclass she delivered at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics in February. When a figure skater violently fights their way onto the absolute biggest, most terrifying, heavily scrutinized athletic stage in the entire history of human civilization, the overwhelming, suffocating pressure usually forces them to retreat into complete creative safety. The traditional Olympic playbook aggressively dictates that you must skate to something sweeping, something deeply orchestral, something incredibly safe and fundamentally predictable that sounds exactly like every single other conservative Olympic program broadcast over the last 30 years. But Alysa Liu looked directly at that archaic, suffocating tradition, completely laughed in its face, and violently threw the rulebook into the incinerator. When she stepped onto the pristine Italian ice for her ultimate free skate, she did not rely on Beethoven or Tchaikovsky. She aggressively weaponized a massive, pulsating, entirely modern pop anthem, Stateside, by Pink Pantheress and Zara Larsson. She actively chose a song that her actual specific generation actively listens to on their daily commutes, in their headphones at the gym, and in the absolute raw reality of their everyday lives. But she did not simply skate to the background track. She completely, brilliantly reconstructed the actual music video choreography directly onto the Olympic ice, broadcasting it to billions of people across the entire globe. The massive, highly educated Olympic crowd did not quite know how to process it for the first few seconds, but then the absolute, undeniable brilliance of the moment completely washed over them. What they were actively witnessing was not just a terrifyingly elite display of biomechanical jumping execution. It was a deeply personal, entirely joyful, utterly triumphant celebration of modern youth culture. The viral clip aggressively spread across the internet like an uncontrollable wildfire, completely breaching the insulated walls of the figure skating community and actively dominating massive sports accounts, high-fashion blogs, and elite pop culture aggregates. And then the absolute ultimate human validation occurred. Zara Larsson actively watched the completely breathtaking athletic display unfold in real time and publicly, emotionally confessed that witnessing Alyssa perform her song actually brought her to literal tears. She explicitly stated that the more she watched the absolute mastery of the program, the more intensely emotional she became, because it looked entirely natural, completely beautiful, and felt exactly like watching a human being do exactly what they were biologically put on this earth to execute. That is absolutely not a scripted PR quote. That is the raw, undeniable power of true art deeply moving another artist. Alyssa's performance single-handedly caused the song to violently surge up the global streaming charts overnight, actively proving that she possesses a terrifying gravitational power to aggressively manipulate global music markets simply by stepping onto the ice. This massive, undeniable cultural momentum seamlessly transitioned into her Olympic short program, where she actively deployed the exact same terrifyingly brilliant strategy, opting to skate to Laufey's deeply emotional, hauntingly beautiful 2023 track, Promise. In the hands of a lesser, heavily manufactured athlete, it might have simply been background noise. But infused with Alyssa's elite edge work, her terrifying rotational velocity, and her profound, mature artistic interpretation, the song completely exploded, and a massive, brand-new wave of global fans actively discovered Laufey's entire discography strictly through a 2-minute Olympic athletic performance. But the absolute, undeniable pinnacle of this entirely organic cultural crossover, a moment that genuinely feels entirely too incredibly cinematic to actually exist in reality, occurred shortly after the Olympic Games completely concluded. Alysa Liu, the reigning, undisputed Olympic champion of the world, quietly bought a ticket and attended one of Laufey's massive live concerts. She did not demand a VIP backstage pass, yet she did not orchestrate a massive paparazzi photo opportunity. She was standing directly in the crowd, completely blending in as a massive, genuine fan who simply loves the music. And Laufey, operating at the absolute peak of her own global musical dominance, actively spotted the Olympic champion in the sea of thousands of people, completely stopped her massive live musical performance dead in its tracks, looked directly at the crowd, and aggressively declared on a hot microphone, "She's like the best figure skater in the world." Do you understand what this means for my 8-year-old figure skating heart? I was so bad, but she is so incredible. The massive arena absolutely violently erupted. I want you to actively, deeply process the sheer psychological magnitude of that specific interaction. An elite athlete showed up entirely as a fan, while actively stripping away all of her massive Olympic ego, and the globally famous artist completely stopped her own show to actively bow down to her athletic supremacy. That is the absolute definitive death of sterile corporate networking. That is two incredibly powerful, highly successful young women who genuinely deeply respect each other's elite artistry, actively finding each other in the absolute most authentic, beautiful, and human way mathematically possible. But we absolutely must address the deeply fascinating, highly complex, and completely paradoxical aesthetic reality that makes Alysa Liu such an incredibly terrifying, unstoppable force in the modern cultural landscape. The viral dance video with Laufey features Alyssa in a highly curated, deeply feminine, vintage-inspired orange mini dress complete with chunky retro bangles and immaculate knee-high boots. But the absolute undeniable truth that makes her so utterly captivating is that this heavily stylized, hyper-feminine presentation is genuinely completely opposite to her actual everyday off-ice identity. Alysa Liu has aggressively openly described her own personal style as highly alternative. The exact second she steps off the frozen hardwood of the ice rink, she completely sheds the sparkling costumes and actively embraces deeply masculine street style. She aggressively rocks incredibly baggy oversized clothing, dark moody color palettes, facial piercings, and her deeply iconic, highly rebellious striped raccoon hair. She actively proudly told massive fashion publications like Cosmopolitan and W Magazine that she feels entirely, genuinely comfortable in heavily masculine aesthetics, completely leaning into the fact that when she shows up to massive public events in her standard everyday fits, the uneducated public frequently hilariously mistakes her for a gritty, hardcore snowboarder. And her absolute reaction to that fundamental misunderstanding is pure, unadulterated swagger. She actively takes it as a massive compliment. She completely loves aggressively throwing the traditional, highly conservative public entirely off balance. The delicate, highly refined, deeply feminine costumes on the ice are absolutely an essential part of the theatrical art form of figure skating. But the absolute exact millisecond she leaves the arena, she is entirely swamped in her brother's oversized denim jeans. She actively grew up in an incredibly dynamic, highly fluid household with 4 siblings, including 3 triplets, where every single sibling aggressively possessed a completely different clashing aesthetic, from hardcore emo punk to standard denim basics. They constantly violently swapped clothes across completely different style identities, meaning Alyssa was fundamentally raised in an environment where identity was never a rigid, suffocating prison, but a highly fluid, entirely customizable daily choice. The absolute undeniable elite Olympic champion dancing gracefully in an orange mini dress is the exact same fiercely independent athlete who aggressively posts pictures of her alternative striped hair and actively types "Mad Woman, let's go" in her own completely chaotic comment sections. There is absolutely no underlying psychological contradiction. It is simply the terrifying, brilliant reality of a Gen Z superstar who is entirely unapologetically comfortable, aggressively existing as multiple complex versions of herself simultaneously. Or, gee, this completely unprecedented, highly fluid, deeply authentic reality brings us directly to the absolute undeniable reason why massive global brands, heavy corporate marketing agencies, and the archaic International Skating Union are completely, entirely terrified of Alyssa Liu's massive influence. For decades, the elite corporate playbook for athletes has been incredibly rigid and deeply boring. You win a massive global championship, a massive brand immediately comes calling. You sign a highly restrictive contract, you shoot a sterile, heavily scripted television campaign, and eventually your cultural relevance quietly fades away into the absolute abyss. But what is aggressively happening with Alyssa Liu completely, violently destroys that entire template. She absolutely did not hire a PR firm to aggressively pitch her to Lofi. She did not orchestrate a massive corporate strategy session to secure Pink Pantheress's attention. She simply stepped onto the absolute biggest athletic stage in human history, unapologetically skated to the exact music she genuinely deeply loves, and actively let the sheer gravitational power of her elite biomechanics and her artistic soul completely dictate the outcome. She allowed the music to naturally, organically find its way directly back to the original artist. The artist deeply felt her authenticity, and they actively, voluntarily, and enthusiastically pulled her directly into their highly exclusive musical worlds. That specific, a hyper-authentic level of massive cultural influence is the absolute holy grail of modern marketing. And it is entirely mathematically impossible to manufacture, schedule, or purchase. The exact terrifying second it feels heavily orchestrated, the highly educated, incredibly cynical Gen Z consumer base instantly rejects it. You absolutely cannot fake this. You simply have to fiercely show up, boldly execute your undeniable truth, and if it completely connects, the absolute biggest titans of industry will actively come looking for you. Lofi aggressively sought her out. Pink Pantheress actively validated her in the comments section. Zara Larsson was physically brought to tears watching her skate. And through it all, Alyssa Liu remains completely unbothered, actively wearing her brother's baggy jeans, proudly calling herself a mad woman, and aggressively rewriting the entire cultural topography of what an Olympic champion is actually allowed to be. The complete and total intersection of elite professional sports, high fashion, and global music has officially permanently shifted. And the archaic, highly conservative old guard of the sporting establishment is completely powerless to stop it. Alyssa Liu is no longer just a brilliantly talented, highly decorated Olympic figure skater. She is an absolute, undeniable global cultural titan who completely, entirely owns her own narrative. The incredibly brave, highly controversial path she took to secure her ultimate glory, actively rejecting the sterile, heavily manufactured ice princess archetype in favor of a completely fluid, deeply alternative, unapologetic identity, has completely and violently detonated the fundamental rulebook of global celebrity. Her staggering, internet-breaking viral dance video with Lofi was the ultimate irrefutable proof that she is operating on a completely different cultural, athletic, and psychological frequency than anyone else in the entire world. The dark ages of forced corporate athletic sponsorships are permanently dead and buried, and Alyssa Liu is standing proudly over the grave, wearing an orange mini dress and knee-high boots holding the smoking gun. I want to pass this massive, highly debated, and entirely critical question directly over to you. the absolute smartest and most passionate fans in the entire global figure skating community. When you look directly at the sheer, completely organic cultural dominance of Alyssa Liu, do you firmly believe she is currently the most culturally influential Olympic athlete on the entire planet? How heavily do you think her fierce, unapologetic alternative style and her refusal to conform have permanently changed the deeply conservative, highly toxic culture of international figure skating? And ultimately, do you believe that her completely organic, unscripted connection with massive artists like Lofi and Pink Pantheress proves that the traditional corporate PR machine is officially obsolete? I want to see your deepest, most analytical, and fiercest tactical debates in the comment section below right now. Make sure to absolutely smash that like button to push this crucial, eye-opening breakdown through the massive algorithm. Subscribe to Plus Capero Skate because we are the absolute only channel providing this elite level of undisputed, unapologetic accuracy. And turn on those bell notifications so you never miss our explosive deep dives into the real, unfiltered business of figure skating. The ice has officially melted. The cultural standard has been permanently raised to impossible heights, and we will be right here to analyze every single massive shift in the landscape. Catch you in the next video.